Hello and welcome to Expanded Knowledge. Today is election day, and so thought it would be a good day to focus on what presidents have said about UFOs, and it's quite interesting actually. We're going to look at what every single president has said about UFOs since since Truman in the late 1940s up until today, and they've all said something directly about the UFOs. That's and many of them are very interesting. So, in the light of the election day today, um, we're going to look at that. And now, I'm going to be pulling these all from actually a book that I co-wrote with a UFO researcher named Ryan Wood. You may have heard of his father, um, Dr. Robert Wood, and both of them, have written books and done research. Dr. Robert Wood, goes back. You can read up on him. But anyway, um, it's kind of funny because this is the first book that I've ever published. I literally do have like about 10 different books that have been like under construction for a number of years. Some of them going back many years, but I've never gotten around to finishing and publishing. This was a book that I actually buckled down and um, we finished and we just published about a month ago. And yeah, so disclaimer, because I know that probably, well, at least from one listener that I'm aware of, one critical listener who seems to think that I make these videos and my little channel here as a way to, promote my books and to make money from the UFO subject, and that's not my intention. But if I write a book, I'll be clear though. If I write a book and and I publish it and it has value, which I wouldn't write a book if it didn't have a lot of value to this field. Of course, I'm going to tell people about it. Of course, I want people to buy it. There's nothing wrong with creating a product that you work really hard on with good intentions and selling it to people. So I just want to nip that in the bud because I'll probably get at least one, maybe more comments saying you're pushing your book. There's nothing wrong with making money. There's nothing wrong with writing a book and then telling people about it. So with all that being said, um, yeah, I'll be opening for you in the video here live the first book I've ever published, um, and I haven't looked at it yet. So I'm gonna just check it out here and see how it's looking, see how it's feeling. Um, nice. That is pretty good. All right, so the title is UFOs, Who Knows? And basically, I had reached out to Ryan Wood to interview him for my podcast. I was interested in his research and also his father's work. And after speaking, Ryan had said he had an unfinished project from back in the day where he had collected a bunch of quotes from various people going back, to the 40s through the 60s. And so basically, I partnered up with him and we went on and I sort of filled in all the gaps. I also went back and um, gathered many quotes as we could possibly put together in the time frame that we wanted to kind of complete the project. And I will say that you know I am definitely proud. We are definitely proud of what we were able to compile in this book, and I think it's a really unique resource because it's just like one place, all these people, and what we have here are people from the science, military, religion, politics, government, and sports and Hollywood. So you're getting all these different perspectives here, and it's all in this book. And there's been some really interesting things said, and certainly, we definitely, I'm sure, missed some people here, but you can check it out. I'll throw a link in the description below. But anyway, if I can take another 30 seconds here as I just look at this with you here for the first time. Yeah, I mean, it's pretty good. I'm thinking like the quality of the print of the book and how everything looks. This is like from Amazon Publishing. Yeah, I mean, it's definitely not the same as like some of the publishing quality of other books, but it is the easiest DIY way to get your book out there is to do the Amazon direct publishing. And yeah, I mean, I think it's pretty good. It's pretty good. And you can see, we have all the pictures of everyone with the quotes on there. And yeah. All right. Well, thanks for taking the moment with me. I'm sure it's not that engaging to just watch me take in the book here, but I thought I thought it would be maybe cool to do it live here on the video. The first opening of the first book that I've ever published. All right, let's look at what the presidents have said all these years. Okay, here is from our chapter on presidents. And in the introduction here, as I say here, leaders in several nations worldwide have not hesitated to address the UFO topic. It turns out almost every U.S. president since the 1940s has pledged, publicly or privately, to get to the bottom of UFOs. Some have requested more information and were denied, while others have made seemingly mysterious public statements about UFOs and aliens. So let's get into it. First up, we have Harry Truman. Now, I know that there are many stories of Roosevelt before him having knowledge, but I didn't take it back that far. I hadn't uncovered any direct quote from Roosevelt about UFOs, not saying it doesn't exist, but I didn't find anything. So Harry Truman, and this took some digging, man, I tell you. By the way, I did this whole presidential section, and it actually took quite a bit of digging for a lot of these, and surveying all of the sources. Anyway, here's what Truman said. Quote, "We discussed UFOs at every conference we had with the military, and they never were able to make me a concrete report. I don't have anything on the subject, and there's always things like that going on, flying saucers, and they've had other things." And that was in 1958 at a press conference in Ohio. And this is verified by the Truman Library. It wasn't so easy to verify if he really said this, and if the video was even real, but the Truman Library did verify that it was authentic. The other quote, he says, quote, "If there is any evidence of a strategic threat to the national security, the collection and evaluation of UFO data by Central Intelligence warrants more intense study and attention at the highest government level." And he was reported as saying that in 1948 by his military aide, Colonel Robert Landry, reported by Garrett Graff as recently as 2023. So I'll leave you there with the Truman stuff. There's a lot of stuff in the lore about Truman being involved with meetings, allegedly agreements with ET, allegedly. But certainly, if we go off of his comment in 1958, where he's basically saying, we talked about UFOs at every conference with the military, but they never could give me a concrete answer, and that he doesn't have anything on the subject, and that there's always things like this going on, flying saucers. If he was being honest there in 1958, that would lead us to believe he was kept in the dark about what was going on. I don't know, or was he just saying that in the public comment? Hope maybe history will tell us, because he was the president in the key moment there, 1945 to 1953, the key origin and onset of the mass UFO sightings. This man was president, so interesting to see there. Moving along, next up we had General Dwight D. Eisenhower, who was again a key president, a very key moment here, 1953 to 1961. And it took digging to find something concrete from Eisenhower, for sure. But he did say, quote, "With regard to recent UFO reports, nothing has come to me at all, either verbally or in written form. A man whom I trust from the Air Force said that it was, as far as he knew, completely inaccurate to believe that they came from any outside planet or otherwise." So you can go two routes on this, right? You can go the route where in the popular lore, it's said that Eisenhower had a secret meeting with aliens, that he knew what was going on, and so forth. And so his quote here could be just him, giving an official statement, staying within his security restrictions and not revealing what he actually knew. It's definitely possible. Then there's the other possibility where he was being honest in this quote and he really didn't know. He really was kept in the dark by, let's say, some dark state, deep state, whatever you want to call it, group that was controlling this and had perhaps their own crash retrieval, reverse engineering, deep black classified programs, which then perhaps started to get some success during Eisenhower's presidency, as it's argued for 1954, the mid 1950s. Perhaps anti-gravity was actually cracked and we started having our own UFOs, perhaps. Some say it may even go back earlier than that with the experimental craft. So I don't know. Let's say it's possible that Eisenhower was really kept in the dark about this. Certainly his farewell speech would hint at that, where he coined the term military industrial complex and warned United States citizens to be aware of the military industrial complex and how it could ruin our democracy. Pretty telling speech for him to give leaving office in 1961. But, the interesting thing here is if he was being sincere here, what's the same pattern we see from Truman is that he was kept in the dark about it. Nothing came to him at all, even verbally or written. And someone that he trusted in the Air Force said that to his knowledge, it wasn't anything that came from an outside planet. Does that mean that the flying saucers were something of a human experiment? I don't know. Read between the lines as you will there with Eisenhower, who is, probably maybe the most implicated president in the UFO lore as far as having knowledge and even secret meetings with the alleged aliens. Then we go on to John F. Kennedy, 1961 to 1963. And Kennedy said, quote, "I would like you to assume personally the initiative and central responsibility within the government for the development of a program of substantive cooperation with the Soviet Union in the field of outer space, including the development of specific technical proposals." This is related to the idea that Kennedy wanted to work with the Soviets on sharing their UFO data so that they wouldn't think one or the other was, sending a nuclear missile over and then retaliate when it was just some, a UAP. And then the second quote, he says, quote, "I'd like to tell the public about the alien situation, but my hands are tied." And this is not as concrete of a source, but this is supposedly what he said to Bill Holden, who was an Air Force One loadmaster on a flight to Germany in 1963. And this is quoted in the book Alien Agenda by Jim Marrs. So we could go on a long tangent about Kennedy and what people have said in alleged documents, that he knew something was going on. Even people saying that his assassination was related in part to his plan to reveal information about the UFOs to the public. And then people make the connection to the fact that he was very close with James Forrestal, and Forrestal was kind of like a mentor to him. James Forrestal, the first Secretary of Defense, who was killed in mysterious circumstances, died in mysterious circumstances, allegedly a suicide. But if you read the book, um, damn, I forget the author's name, but there's a very good book that did a Freedom of Information Act request on the Navy's report of James Forrestal's supposed suicide. And if you read that, you see it's very clear that it wasn't just a suicide. There was like broken glass in the room. Somebody came and cleaned up the room the day that, the morning that the investigators looked at the room. The report was kept classified for 60 years, and then and it took a lot of effort by the researcher to get it declassified. On and on. Anyway, tangent, but just saying there are those connections people make, because it was said that Forrestal in 1949 knew what was going on with UFOs, and he was going to tell the public as he felt they had a right to know, and that's allegedly why they killed him, or part of the reason why whoever they are, killed him. All right, so moving along from Kennedy now, we move into the Lyndon B. Johnson. And Lyndon B. Johnson had quite an interesting statement that he made before he was president, a few years before, in 1960, in a letter to Major Donald Kehoe, which was printed in Fate magazine. And he said to Major Kehoe, quote, "The Preparedness Investigating Subcommittee is keeping a close watch over new developments in the UFO field, with standing instructions to report to me any recent significant sightings of unidentified flying objects, along with an analysis of the conduct and conclusions of the Air Force investigation of each such sighting." So here we see Johnson was clearly interested and involved in the reporting and investigating of the UFOs way back in 1960. And there's lots of speculation about Johnson kind of being, an asset of the dark state, the control group, whatever we want to term it and conceptualize it. Moving on to Richard Nixon, who's an interesting one. And the only quote that's really been out there attributed to him was him saying, quote, "I'm not at liberty to discuss the government's knowledge of extraterrestrial UFOs at this time. I am still personally being briefed on the subject." And this quote was printed in the newspaper The Telegraph in 2009, but it was never verified. The Richard Nixon Foundation published a response to it, uh, and interestingly, they didn't deny its authenticity nor confirm it. So take that as you will. There are these stories, for example, Jackie Gleason, his wife, saying that Jackie had a story that Richard Nixon took him to see some biological remains at an Air Force base. Um, and there, of course, in the lore, the story is that Nixon was quite read into the UFO subject and part of a group that had, pretty decent knowledge about the truth of what was going on with it. Those are the claims. Those are the stories. It is worth remembering that Nixon was the vice president to Eisenhower. So if there's any truth to the lore about Eisenhower being read in or even having meetings of some kind, Nixon potentially would have been in the know there. And that reminds me also that I should mention about Eisenhower. In his presidential library, every president has like their archives of documents that are kept somewhere. And Eisenhower actually has a whole folder or box on UFOs. You can only see it if you go in person to the archives there, which are out in the middle of the country, I think in like Kentucky or Kansas or something like that. It'd be pretty interesting to see there. I definitely want to check them out. I'm going to try to do that on a road trip at some point. So anyway, we move along from Richard Nixon now, and we get into Gerald Ford. Gerald Ford had some things to say on UFOs. He said in 1966, quote, "I strongly recommend that there be a commitment to investigation of the UFO phenomenon. I think we owe it to the people to establish credibility regarding UFOs and to produce the greatest possible enlightenment on this subject. And this was in a letter sent as a congressman to the chairman of the Armed Services Committee. So again, clear interest by President Ford here as his time in Congress. And in the second quote, he said much later in 1998 in a personal letter to George Filer, he said, "During my public career in Congress, as vice president and president, I made various requests for information on UFOs. The official authorities always denied the UFO allegations." So just like we've had with almost every president here, was that their official statement to maintain, the secrecy they were required by law to keep? And is the lore about them true? There's even stories of Ford allegedly having a close encounter with an NHI. Um, and of course, he's connected to the others like Nixon and that whole crowd and Cheney and all of them. Or was he being honest? And has this always just been denied to the presidents? Something to, I think, keep both possibilities in mind. We move along to Jimmy Carter now. And Jimmy Carter was perhaps, you could say he was the first president to really have a distinct, outright interest in finding out about UFO knowledge and making it publicly available, and also the first president to claim to have a direct UFO sighting. And here he describes his sighting, quote, "It was the darndest thing I'd ever seen. It was big, it was very bright, it changed colors, and it was about the size of the moon. We watched it for 10 minutes, but none of us could figure out what it was. One thing's for sure, I'll never make fun of people who say they've seen UFOs in the sky." That was in 1969. And then he went on to say, quote, "If I become president, I'll make every piece of information this country has about UFO sightings available to the public and scientists. I am convinced that UFOs exist because I have seen one." And then he also says, "I don't laugh at people anymore when they say they've seen UFOs. I've seen one myself." Okay, and that was a comment made later on in 1999. And Carter, again, same theme here. Interesting, the lore. It's said that Carter was at first denied when he asked the CIA director Bush to be read in. He was denied access, saying he didn't have a need to know. Then he opened up his own investigations, which Danny Sheehan, he's a Harvard lawyer who's an activist on UFO transparency, you've probably seen out there, and he said that he was involved in that investigation and saw some classified documents investigating it for Carter's administration. And there's the story, which some have said is true, some have said is not true, that Carter, after he was briefed about the UFO subject, was seen, with his hands on his head, crying at his desk in the Oval Office. That's the story. Don't know if there's truth to it, whether or not there is, but that's Carter for you. Okay, pretty interesting one. Moving along here. Through the 80s, we have Ronald Reagan. And he certainly was president during an interesting time and had some interesting things to say. And Reagan said, "I occasionally think how quickly our differences worldwide would vanish if we were facing an alien threat from outside this world." That was addressing the UN in 1987. And then he also said, earlier, he said when he was governor of California, to the Wall Street Journal in 1972, quote, "I was in a plane last week when I looked out the window and saw this bright light. It was zigzagging around. It was a bright white light. We followed it to Bakersfield, and suddenly, to our utter amazement, it went straight up into the heavens. When I got off the plane, I told Nancy about it." Okay, so he had a sighting of his own. And he made these sort of enigmatic statements where he said, what if we face an alien threat from outside the world? So again, you could take two different routes on this. You could take the kind of mundane route of saying, he didn't really know much. He just kind of had an interest and was willing to speak about it. And then there's the other side. There are the rumors, there are the lore that said that he was read into a pretty decent degree and knew what was going on, to some degree. And that was what his statements were kind of related to. And also, there was a story that when the film Close Encounters of the Third Kind was screened somewhere where Reagan and certain high up people were watching it, allegedly, and I forget who reported this. I want to say, was it what's his name, Gray? Damn, I forget his name, but anyway, I think this was reported in Timothy Good's book Above Top Secret. But you could Google it and find out the source of this story. But Reagan, apparently, after Close Encounters of the Third Kind ended, he turned to someone and said, "You and I are, probably the only people in this whole room that knows how true this movie is." So there's the lore, almost as there is with many of these presidents, that they knew more than they let on. And actually, let's see, there was one more quote here, and this is about the same sighting he had. So rather than read that there, we're going to just move along now. And we get into the first Bush president, George H.W. Bush Sr., where he was quoted as saying, quote, "Americans can't handle the truth." And then again saying, quote, "I am very careful in public life about dealing with classified information. I know a fair amount about the topic," he said in response to questions about UFOs. And then, of course, we have the stories that as CIA director, he denied both Jimmy Carter and Bill Clinton a briefing on the what was known about UFOs. So, yeah, take what you got there. He was pretty tight-lipped about it. Otherwise, Bill Clinton, probably, after Jimmy Carter, the most publicly vocal president about wanting to know about UFOs, and his legacy and his takeaways, up for interpretation. Clinton said, quote, "I want you to find the answers to two questions for me. One, who killed JFK? And two, are there UFOs?" Clinton was dead serious. "I had looked into both, but wasn't satisfied with the answers I was getting." Um, and this was a quote that he gave a certain researcher. Now, he did also go on to say in 2005, when I was president in my second term, there was an anniversary observance of Roswell. People were convinced that the government had buried a UFO and perhaps an alien deep underground because we wouldn't allow anybody to go there. I did attempt to find out if there were any secret government documents that revealed things. If there were, they were concealed from me too. And if there were, well, I wouldn't be the first American president that underlings have lied to, or that career bureaucrats have waited out. But there may be some career person sitting around somewhere hiding these dark secrets, even from elected presidents. But if so, they successfully eluded me, and I'm almost embarrassed to tell you I did, chuckling, try to find out. So again, that's pretty telling. If Clinton's being honest, he's basically saying what a lot of presidents seem to have said was that they were denied knowledge of this. And then, perhaps telling more of what maybe he uncovered is this quote that was reported by a White House reporter, Sarah McClendon, um, where he said, quote, "There's a government inside the government and I don't control it." So we can take that for what it is. All right, moving on to George W. Bush, 2001 to 2009. Moving along to George Bush. This is in an interview that he did in 2017 on the Jimmy Kimmel Show. So you can see I have the different parts, queued up to who's speaking. So Jimmy Kimmel says, "Did you go through the secret UFO documents?" And Bush says, "Maybe. My daughters asked the same question." And Jimmy Kimmel says, "Would you be allowed to tell your daughters what was in those files?" And Bush says, "No." Makes a very serious expression. Um, and that was the end of that conversation. And then um, he had also said at another point in an interview, I know some, I know a fair amount. And then he's also said, quote, um, in response to a question in 2005 about if he, learned about the UFO subject, and he said, I did, I can't talk about it. So pretty simple stuff there, but Bush definitely made enough comments to make it known that allegedly he knew information and he couldn't talk about it. And of course, he's implicated with the group, that is supposedly, more into the inner workings of the larger secrecy group. Then we have Obama, who was one of the more interesting ones to research and study. Again, Jimmy Kimmel interview in 2015. And Jimmy Kimmel says, did you look for secret UFO information? That's the first thing I would do. Barack Obama laughs and then says, the aliens won't let it happen. You'd reveal all their secrets. They exercise strict control over us. All right. And he kind of makes like I originally had it in here. I guess I decided to take it out, but it's kind of important context when he makes the comments like, yeah, he's kind of joking, but he also kind of makes like a menacing face. That's like, it's kind of eerie the way he does it. You have to go watch itself. You can just YouTube like Jimmy Kimmel interview Barack Obama UFOs, and then after that little bit, Jimmy Kimmel says, "Did you see anything?" And Obama says, "Quote: I can't reveal anything," and makes a very serious expression. All right, then he's on the James Corden show in 2021, and he says, "When it comes to aliens, there are some things I just can't tell you on air." And the whole crowd and the people on the show start laughing. But interestingly, Obama keeps a very serious expression. You can go watch the clip yourself. And then Obama says, when I came into office, I asked, is there a lab somewhere we're keeping the alien specimens and spaceships? They did a little bit of research, and the answer was no. There's footage and records of objects in the skies that we can't explain, but I have nothing to report to you today. And that was that. And yeah, that was pretty interesting. The most interesting part of that is like everyone's laughing and making a joke of it, and Obama's like dead serious, so which to me was pretty telling. And then in an interview with Stephen Colbert in 2020, Obama says there are times when prying information out of the bowels of an agency can be challenging. Stephen Colbert says, UFOs? Any UFOs? Did you ask about that? And Obama says, certainly asked about it. And Stephen Colbert says, and Barack Obama says, can't tell you, sorry. So the same theme again there, continuing, claiming to have been briefed, to have knowledge of it, but can't talk about it. Then we get to Donald Trump, 2017 to 2021. He is interviewed by ABC News, and they ask him, we're reading more and more reports of Navy pilots seeing lots and lots of UFOs. Have you been briefed on that? What do you know? And Trump says, I think it's probably, I want them to think whatever they think. I've seen and I've read and I've heard, and I did have one very brief meeting on it, but people are saying that they're seeing UFOs. The interviewer says, do you think you'd know if there was evidence of extraterrestrials? And Trump says, I think our great pilots would know. And some of them really see things that are a little bit different. So he's kind of dancing around the question there, but it's pretty interesting. Another interview with NBC News in 2020, the interviewer says, before you leave the office, will you let us know if there's aliens? Would you ever open up Roswell and let us know what's going on there? And Trump says, there are millions of people who want to go there and see it. I won't talk to you about what I know about it, but it's very interesting. Again, claiming knowledge. And then perhaps maybe the most specific that he got was in 2023 on the Hugh Hewitt podcast. He's asked, what did you learn about UFOs when you were in the Oval? Do you believe in them? Trump says, You have believers in that like you wouldn't believe, and they're very solid people. I interviewed a couple people from the Air Force, and these guys were central casting, perfect guys with their crew cuts, not the kind of guys, the guy that's going to lie, and they believe it. They said they saw it. Hugh Hewitt says, "So, you got briefed on UFOs?" Trump says, "I was briefed, yeah." Hewitt says, "So, do you believe in them?" Trump says, "I have. I've always have an open mind, but you know what? I focus on things like China." Okay, so he kind of shifts out of the subject there. So, implying that he knows something. Again, you could argue that Trump is not very trustworthy with what he says, but there's implications there that he has been briefed on some information. All right, and then that brings us up into Biden. And what I think is really interesting about Biden is that here's a president that was in office during the most publicly and governmentally visible interest and movement on the UFO subject, probably in history. And he has said the least about it, basically said nothing about it that I could find anywhere except for his comments about the Chinese balloons and the UAP shoot downs of 2023, where he said, quote, "We don't know exactly what these three objects were, but nothing right now suggests that they were related to China's spy balloon program or that they were surveillance vehicles from any other country. The intelligence community's current assessment is that these three objects were most likely balloons." Okay. And yeah, you wonder about Biden. One thing I know about Biden is that during his time in Senate, he was involved in being a very, pro secrecy and classification of information. So it would fit the bill for him if he would just be kind of go along with keeping national security secrets and not being transparent. I mean, we should have gotten some kind of comment out of this guy in 4 years when we had the hearing. He made no comment about the hearing in 2023. I mean, you had the UAP task force do their hearing and investigation and Arrow. You had all this under Biden, and he said nothing about it. So to me, that's very telling. There's clearly a cover up of some nature, and so that leads us, to today with the election, and who are we going to have as our next president, um, and who would be better? Yes, Harris was asked once in a talk show what she thought about it, and she kind of just laughed and danced around the question. We know what Trump has said. Yes, more recently on certain podcasts like Joe Rogan and the other one, Jake Paul, he did say nothing really new, but basically that he said he would open up the files, as he says. Um, so I don't know, and we'll see who ends up in president. It's very interesting that this hearing in the House Oversight Committee is happening on November 13th, right after the election. You could analyze that as potentially a good or potentially a bad thing, in terms of how the public will receive it or in terms of how it will be conducted based on the election results. But anyway, yeah, I hope that the information here on the presidents was interesting to you. Again, you could check it out in our book, me and Ryan Wood's book, UFOs, Who Knows? We've got all the presidents in there and many, many more people, many government, many military, also a lot of celebrities, religious leaders and figures. So it's pretty interesting read. And I'll put the link in the description. Let's see what happens with the election. And yeah, hopefully that this was interesting for you. I just did back-to-back recordings here, so I'm running out of fumes. So I apologize if the energy was a little low here in the video today, but I wanted to get this information out and put it out here uh, thematically with Election Day here in the United States. So once again, thank you for watching. Hope you have a great day, and I will see you in the next one. Take care.